Hi, good evening, everyone. How are you doing? It's a bit warmer inside here, right? A bit cozy, and we're all very excited to have you here tonight. Thank you for joining us. My name's Asma Malik. My pronouns are she, her. I'm very proud to be Toronto's deputy mayor and very proud to be the city councillor in Spadina, Fort York, Ward 10, which is home to City Hall, and really proud to be hosting tonight's budget town hall with my colleague in Ward 13, Councillor Moyes. And as in addition to the tremendous responsibility of being the councillor in Ward 13, is also the chair of the Board of Health, which is incredible. And we're so excited to also welcome two special guests today who will be sharing some brief remarks. First, our city's budget chief, Councillor Shelley Carroll, who has been leading this process again this year. And we're so excited to hear more from you, Councillor Carroll. And of course, our mayor, Mayor Olivia Chow, is here as well. And she'll be sharing some thoughts about the budget process and the experience so far. And as we begin, I will pass it over to Councillor Moyes to get us started with our land acknowledgements.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Malik, and welcome everyone. As mentioned, my name is Councillor Chris Moyes. I'm the Councillor of Toronto Centre, Ward 13, and my pronouns are he and him. And it's great to see so many wonderful faces here today taking interest in our city and our city budget, and to those online as well. So before we begin, I'm going to do the land acknowledgement. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that the land we are on is traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. As a Caribbean Canadian, I am committed to continually acting in solidarity with our African, Caribbean, and Black communities seeking freedom and reproductive justice in light of the history and ongoing legacy of slavery that continues to impact our communities across Canada. As part of this commitment, I would also like to acknowledge that not all people came to these lands as migrants and settlers. Specifically, I wish to acknowledge those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. In support of the City of Toronto's ongoing efforts to confront anti-Black racism, I pay tribute to those ancestors of African, Caribbean, and Black origin and descent. Back to Deputy Mayor Malik.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moyes. So I'm just going to give us a quick rundown of how things are going to unfold tonight. And first of all, thank you again for all being here. And we know that you're here because we believe, and you've heard me say it before, and we'll say it again, that budgets convey priorities, and this process gives us the direction to be able to see those priorities through our budget allocations and the choices that we make. During the pre-budget consultations and what we've been hearing from residents and stakeholders are a number of priorities that we share, particularly those around transit, around housing, around community services, around our public spaces, and real community safety. And tonight is an opportunity to understand the budget presented to us by staff and for you to be able to share your feedback, to raise your questions. And this budget will continue to have the most opportunities that we've had in a city's history. We set that goal and achieved it last year, and that is something that we continue, and really grateful to Councillor Carroll and the mayor for seeing that through. And I'm glad you're a part of it. And to start things off, I will be asking our special guests to speak, and then that'll be followed by some reflections from myself and Councillor Moyes. Then we're going to have a presentation on what the city's proposed 2024 budget is with Anthony Ng and Mervyn Mendoza. And the second half of the meeting will be dedicated to hearing your thoughts on the proposed budget, as well as answering questions that you have. And we're really grateful for your expertise here, because we know that this group likes to go deep on what we're seeing in front of us. We also have sign-up sheets and information to stay connected with our office. So if anything comes to mind, or you're reflecting on what you're seeing in the budget after you leave here, you can continue to be in touch with us. We also also have small feedback forms for you to be able to share your thoughts with us before you leave. And of course, we're not just meeting with everyone here in person. We have a number of folks who have joined us online as well. So for our virtual attendees, welcome to you. As of course, I can hear everyone has had their mics muted, so we can ensure that all the presentations are heard. And there is a Q&A box for you there to be able to raise your questions. And if you want to see the interpreter or change angles to see a city councilor or a speaker, please click on the top right of the Zoom screen to be able to access the multiple viewers as well. And please include any notes in the chat if you have any issues. And finally, before we hear from our guests, I will just turn it over to Councillor Moyes just about our shared agreements and House rules for sharing this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Malik. So our House rules are as follows. Be respectful. Direct your questions to the appropriate individual. Please ensure you identify your ward when speaking, Ward 13 Toronto Centre or Ward 10 Span Fort York. In order to accommodate many questions, please be as succinct and direct as possible. For those joining us virtually, we are going to collect your questions in the chat and compile them to ensure we can discuss as many topics as possible. Our teams will be sharing question sheets to those in person if you have not already received one. If you prefer not to speak publicly or want to share your thoughts at a later time, there is a handout that you can grab to share your thoughts in writing or online via email. If you do not get to your questions, please leave your name and contact on the survey. Our offices will get to your question after this town hall. So, and back to Deputy Mayor Malik.
Thank you very much. And so to begin, I will invite Mayor Olivia Chow to join us at the start to share her thoughts, followed by Councillor Carroll to kick us off. Thank you so much.
Hey, hi. Good evening. So great to see so many of you here. Some old friends, new friends, those that are online, hello. Yes, put things on chat, okay? I've written notes, but I'm mostly here to listen. Now, you say that, wait a second, then on Monday, the mayor and the budget chief presented the budget. Isn't it done? What am I doing here if it's done? What? No, it is not. So there's actually, this budget that is presented today is from staff. There's some help from us, of course, that reflects our priority. Well, how do I know what is the priority? Well, before anything started, before the new year, we went out in the downtown area on Rose Avenue Public School. Did any of them go to the Rose Avenue Public School? Because we asked you and 12,000 other people what they want. And what we heard back, and it was also online, okay? And we had 4 big meetings, packed with people. What we heard was, not surprisingly, housing, housing, housing. Public transit, congestion, keep Toronto moving, keep our city safe, make life affordable for all of us, please. That's what we heard, okay? In that order, right? So, in this budget, making life affordable. Okay, we're not the federal government. We can't cut taxes. We can't give you a $200 check. Oh, well, never mind about that. We can't do any of that. But what we can do, because we're the city of Toronto, is build housing. Build a lot of affordable housing because we need it, because the rent is so high that by the time you finish paying rent, there's like nothing left. Which is why 1 in 10 people here in Toronto use the food bank, and a third of them are kids. So we know the difficulty. So we're building a lot of them more. How are we doing that? We are cutting the approval times by 80%. Used to be 4 or 5 years. So you have to wait to get an approval. Right now it's like a few months. less than a year. Okay. And we are building. In the meantime, you and I know how long it takes to build something. And I just got here for a year and a half, right? Wasn't long enough. We're building now, but you won't see it for a little bit of time. So at the meantime, we're buying buildings and turn it into affordable housing, right? Little small buildings. So the budget chief can tell you lots about that because we're putting a lot of money on doing that. And we are protecting tenants through rent banks, through many different issues. You can ask our folks at EPIC. There's different programs, okay? Protecting tenants. We're also freezing TDC fares because it's expensive already enough. No fare increase, second year in a row. All right. I just came back from the Wellesley subway because 2 days ago, I was at the Bathurst subway. Okay. And then next week, I'm going to be at Kennedy. I'm going to be in Maine. I'm going to be at most of the subway stations because I want to see what people are saying. No fare increase. Great. But more TDC service. Because like I was at Wellesley, you walk in, the front area looks like heck. You know? Yeah, there's a bit of neglect. I know. Like, oh my God, is it ever ugly? And when there's an announcement, you can't hear it. You know why? Because it's been so long that we have not put serious money in fixing the TDC. Not anymore. Major dollars we're putting in to fix TDC and improve the services, subways, streetcars and all that stuff. And then you said, well, life has to be affordable. Well, yeah, we're feeding more kids in school because, when you're hungry, you can't learn. We're opening libraries 7 days a week because it's free. We're extending pool hours. And because our budget chief just became the chair of the police service board member. Yeah, that's 2 days ago. Power, people, power, okay? Ask her about policing. And the city is growing. When the city grows, in 1 year, we got 125,000 more people moving in. A lot of it you see is your neighbor, right? When there's more people in the city of Toronto, in fact, last 10 years, it grew by 35%. Whoa! Which means that if you need to call 911 or 211 for community crisis workers, we need you to get your call answered because they're emergency, right? So we are hiring more paramedics, firefighters, police officers, community crisis workers. So when you call them when you need it, hopefully you don't need to call. But if you do, they're there quickly, right? You don't want to wait too long when you're desperate, right? When you need them. So that costs quite a bit of money. But you and I know keeping streets safe is not just about all of that. It means our young people have a place to go. Youth hub in libraries, after school programs, youth violence prevention programs. There's quite a few of that in there. Okay. So I want you to dig deep into the budget and we want you to give us suggestions. We want to hear from you. On January 30th, on a Thursday, I get to present my budget. And our budget chief is she's working, 16 hours a day in the next few weeks to take all of the comments. And the budget committee going to say, yeah, we think it's okay, but we might need to change a few things here, there. And then she then gives me her recommendation and the budget committee recommendation. I have like 3 or 4 days to turn it around. I won't get any sleep. And then I'll present it back on January 30th. Then all the city councilors are going to come together and say, yes, no, hopefully it's a yes. Then we will approve the budget on February 11th. Okay? See how important it is for you to participate, for you to tell us what you need, to tell us whether you want this or you don't want this, okay? Because we're listening to you. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to join you. And I'm going to turn the mic back to, the budget chief. I'm just a talking head. She's the one that actually has the power. Here she goes.
Oh, I got one.
Got one. Okay.
This one's on as well. Oh, there we go. Okay, now we're on. I didn't want to cut off all the virtual attendees. Well, when we say we're here to answer questions, it's for a limited time only because we're also going tonight. The mayor and I are going to do another town hall tonight, telephone town hall for some registrants. There's another one that you can still register for on the 23rd. So you can really give tonight a listen. And then if you've got more still jammed into your head, more questions, you can think about attending that last telephone town hall on the 23rd. 24th is wrap up. That's where the budget committee will give their final motions to go with this. But the motion, the draft that you're looking at today really is a collaboration. When we go to do those pre-budget meetings, like you saw at Rose Avenue School and throughout the rest of the city, that's about making sure that really the community, city staff, and not just finance staff. Anthony and Mervyn were both at all those meetings, but so too were general managers of divisions, the city manager, the deputy city manager, and then myself and as much of the budget committee as we move throughout the city, so that we're kind of all on the same page. Councillor Moyes and I and the other budget committee members try and reflect that. We look at early drafts and in little groups of two sit down with each division and give them our advice. Make sure that we see your needs in there, but also take a look at the efficiencies. We want to find efficiencies every year. In a corporation that is running operating budget on property tax of 16 billion and another couple of billion made out of water rates and what you pay for your garbage bin, in that size of an organization, you should be able to find efficiencies every year. You'll always find something that we figured out a way we can do this better, figured out a way we can improve this with technology, or we figured out we don't need to be doing this anymore. This is something that council is delivering in a different way in some different department. So you go looking for those. And this year, that was done largely before we even see the draft on Monday morning. Staff had already gone back and forth with finance department and found those efficiencies before we were even looking at it with our budget committee eyes, because we know we have to go there. And so the total of those efficiencies plus some offsets from account to account make up a whopping 680 million this year. Everything we did to get the number down as best we can before we start to look at the needs, the things that we need to invest. And each division also tells us what their needs are. Overhauling of vehicles, life cycle maintenance of technology, bringing new people in because the population has grown. If your particular division is delivering service that really is population driven, so they tell us their needs as well. And so you just heard the mayor walk through some of the things that she's most proud of in the budget, but they very much all came from those pre-budget consultations and what divisions have told us they're hearing our needs, plus their own needs to be able to manage. And so they really do all fall into those three buckets that the mayor outlined. It comes down to safer streets, affordable living, better transit. Those are the biggies. And so many of the things that you'll see in the budget fit into those buckets, and in various ways, because we're all living our lives in various parts of the city in different ways. We're putting a lot of buses into the TTC budget because the bus network that is the hardest working part of the suburban transit network desperately needed. We're also putting a lot into safety and security and enhanced service hours to break up bunching with the vehicles, the higher modes of transit that are downtown for you. And lastly, the biggest investment at all, it's not on the operating side, but in the capital budget, thanks to we finally have both the contribution of the federal government and the provincial government to proceed with ordering the subway cars for Line 2. If you ever have to rely on Line 2, you should be jumping for joy, because had we not been able to order those 55 subway cars, in all good conscience, we would not be able to open the Scarborough expansion of that Line 2 subway line when that line is done. And it'll be done very soon. But without the cars to put on those tracks, we wouldn't even be able to open it. And this is going to bring a lot of reliability, and having that partnership of both orders of government and check in hand made it possible to place that order. So there are those big buckets. When we say safer streets, we don't just mean police. Think of all the ways in which things can be safer, both your home and your streets. In all the first responder areas, we're making investments by doing it over multi-years. That's why you heard us this year coming to an agreement with the police service much earlier. And I'll tell you why. We weren't able to have the upfront conversation last year about if you need more officers, then we need to look at other parts of your budget. There wasn't the time, but we had a lot of time to work on that through the year. And this year we sat down and said, okay, we get it. We do need more officers. We have fewer officers now, today, than we had when this city had a population of 2.6 million. We have fewer officers than we had then. And today, the population of the city is 3.2 million. And so we need to catch up a little bit. So we appreciate that. But we had the time this year to sit down and say, for us to make that investment, you have to find some non-service efficiencies. It takes a lot of administration to run a $1.2 billion corporation called the Toronto Police Service. It takes a lot of administration, and there are ways to find savings there. We also know that if we hire these additional officers, we bring down a lot of the money being spent on overtime, because there just isn't someone to call back in for an extra few hours when you're that short of officers. And so we're finding a way to regularize that one big expense. So tonight, you'll probably have a lot of questions about police and TTC, and you should. Those are the two biggest lines. But we hope that over time, between now and when the budget is adopted, and certainly listening to the presentation tonight, you'll find that we have a number of initiatives all over the city. Anthony will go through them, both operating and capital. What you'll find is we are gradually coming down from that really difficult cliff we were standing at the edge of as we came out of the pandemic, with an almost $2 billion opening shortfall at the beginning of every year. We wish the other orders of government had paid the whole COVID bill, but they didn't. And that's not the kind of expense that property taxes are meant to pay for. And so we've been working our way down from that shortfall, made huge progress. We've come down from 2 billion to now 1.2. Next year, we expect it to be down to 700. And that has meant your investment. We know that we're asking a lot on the property tax bill side, but we made a promise last year. We need an extraordinary investment. We need to get to where you don't see a line about the pandemic in every budget, and we achieved that last year. The banks acknowledged it by improving our credit rating for the first time in 20 years. They said, wow, that is prudent management. And so we got to stay on that track. And so I made a promise last year that what I want is for this to be an arc. We need to start making a trip back down from that 9.5% increase. And as you can see, we've very much done that, and we got to stay on that track. And that means next year, the budget process will start with another hunt for efficiencies, but a really tough look at the city's needs as well. And I just want to close by saying this. By car, I drive through Councillor Moise's ward every night just to get home. You have the unfortunate situation when you live downtown and when you represent downtown. Unfortunately, all the other councillors think they know everything about where you live because we drive through it to get out of here and go home. But drive through Chris's and lived there at one point in my life. Last week, though, I did a ride along with Police Division 14 for an afternoon and did a long drive through very much of Councillor Malik's ward. And it was a great level set for me because I really do have to remember every part of the city. And so seeing it close up from a squad car jumping out of the car at DuPont Station to go in and deal with someone who had said they had a gun in the station but didn't. Bit of a heart pounder for me. It was, unfortunately just a mental health crisis, and there was no gun there. They made sure I was safe, but it was a good day for me to really understand that the needs in the budget, they're different all over the city. And so it seems like, oh, gee, you can't address every need. But well, we have some needs in Don Valley North at the corner of Don Mills Road and Shepherd. I can't forget all you need to have the neighborhoods you want to have in Ward 13 and Ward 14. And definitely got a bird's eye view last week. And so I'm going to keep that focus. I'm going to keep traveling around the city, whether by division or hopping on a streetcar and going along with an operator, something like that, that keeps the focus so that we really do take a look at the need to invest and the need to save to make way for those investments to meet the needs all over the city. And what we're going to do now is go and hear tenant needs in that telephone town hall. But I'm leaving you in good hands. You have a budget committee member here, and Anthony and Mervyn are a set of encyclopedias on our financial structure, basically. Here you go.
Thank you very much. Can we give the mayor and the budget chief a round of applause for being here, especially on such a busy night? There was a budget town hall last night that had hundreds of Torontonians joining tonight, speaking to tenants, and as was mentioned, another one next week for anyone who would like to join that as well, but also continuing to invite your friends and neighbors to be a part of this process. And I'm just going to share a few words about some of the priorities, a little bit more specifically that we're seeing and that have been really important to me as the budget chief and the mayor. Shared, the driving force behind this budget is to continue to get us back on track as a city. We know about the New Deal negotiations. We know about some of the choices that were set in motion from last year. And this budget really demonstrates how do we continue to improve the lives of Torontonians. And that means making sure that we have a city that's affordable, that's enjoyable, and that's one that we feel confident and safe getting around. And I've seen a number of important issues that of course are shared priorities right across the city, but especially for our downtown communities and especially for residents of Spadina, Fort York as well. And so I just want to highlight a few of them, and I've made a few notes so that I keep mindful of time. Number one continues to be housing, right? We share that commitment to housing. This budget invests $349 million into what the mayor was mentioning to build and incentivize rental and affordable housing. And that includes 12,000 new rental homes, which is incredible. And that is also towards improving Toronto community housing buildings and supporting 300 more households through the Toronto Rent Bank program. We all live in the city, and we know that one of the most challenging issues that we are grappling with, continue to face with, and also cannot just face alone is the homelessness crisis. And of course, seeing our neighbors sleeping in tents in parks and in encampments, and making sure that we are committing to everything that we can to make sure that choices over many years that have brought us to this housing crisis are being addressed while we address some of those immediate issues as well, and that the city can enhance its outreach and its effectiveness. And the budget includes funding for increased encampment office staff from the 5 that exist right now to 19, which is very significant and meeting and matching the need that we're seeing. This year's budget also includes $223 million for the Homelessness Service Capital Infrastructure Strategy. And this is so important in response to what I have heard in my community around how we address this issue. And it is to make sure that people are able to access shelter spaces in every part of the city, not just in our downtown. And that is really critical. That means that we are also able to connect people to housing closer to the places where they want to be in every neighborhood that they want to call home. And through this funding, we have the additions for purpose-built affordable rental units and creating that path to permanent housing that we know is ultimately the solution to the housing crisis. I'm very proud to be the newest member of the TTC board, and we had our budget meeting just last week. And as the mayor mentioned, it's so important that we are both increasing service with the TTC as proposed in this budget and freezing fares. And service improvements include more frequent streetcar service, which is so critical to Spadina Fort York. And that includes very specifically increases to the 505 Dundas and the 511 Bathurst streetcar. And, you know, this is a really important issue that I've been really proud to collaborate on with Councillor Moyes and his office around the King Street priority corridor. We have moved forward a number of improvements to that, particularly around traffic agents at busy intersections to increase the effectiveness of moving through those intersections, but most of all, to improve travel times. And I was just out last week with the mayor and making sure that we were sharing widely that this budget expands that program to 100 traffic agents. That means that we can do so much more for one of the most persistent issues that I hear about, which is the time it takes to travel through the city, especially through the downtown core. And of course, in addition to housing and transit, it's the community services, the things that connect us to our neighborhood and to each other. And we see that libraries and, you know, extending the library hours is also something, as I'm riding the TTC and getting around the neighborhood, so many people want to speak about. And what we're doing with this budget is opening 7 days a week libraries for more than 70 libraries across the city, which is absolutely incredible. And of course, maintenance and repairs to our recreation centers, some of that which is long overdue. And now I have a long list of other budget improvements that are in Spadina Fort York, and I will name just a couple that I know are really important, and I hope through this evening I'll be able to share more, and we will be putting that out from my office as well. But, you know, Victoria Memorial Square and David Crombie Park being improved, that continues to be in the budget. New parks are coming to Reese Street, Lower Garrison Creek Park, Trinity Bellwoods Path improvements and continued, you know, experience of that incredible park. So many of us move through Union Station, and there's improvements to that. The Wellington Destructor is one of those places in the ward that that folks have been asking very good questions about, and its future revitalization is also in this budget. We have updated public art. There's road reconstruction on some of our major thoroughfares. 505 Richmond YMCA is funded in this budget, as well as more childcare and more and better ways for us to be able to get around our downtown. And we're going to continue to work together to improve the lives of residents across the city and especially in our downtown to make sure that we are building that just, green and livable Toronto, and especially in our communities and neighborhoods. Again, thank you all for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Moyes now.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Malik. So again, this budget is really about not only maintaining service, but also enhancing it. This is my third year being in budget. I've not been a council for 2 years. I've been in the budget for 3 years, committee for 3 years, and it's quite an eye-opener for me. This year's budget is $18.8 billion. So this year's budget continues a long and hard work of getting the city back to on track. As the mayor and the budget chief mentioned, the budget is about priorities for the city, just through various consultations we've had with you over the last many months. So nearly 12 years of at or below inflation budgets have meant the city had to make cuts to vital services over the last 12 years. But that's changed, and leaving hundreds of staffing positions vacant. While last year's budget got us above water, this year's budget is about stabilizing while making modest improvements to programs and services. Quite frankly, this modest increase should be our new normal going forward. While when you factor in the 1.5 city building fund and the 2% inflation rate, that leaves a modest 3.4 increase, which is going towards funding enhancements to our programs and services. So I've been hearing from constituents like yourselves over the last many months. They want to see more of reliable transit, as the Deputy Mayor mentioned, and the Budget Chief, cleaner sidewalks, streets, and laneways. which is really important for the residents of Toronto Centre. A better 311 service with parks included. As it is right now, parks is not part of the 311 system. Parks that everyone can enjoy. More affordable housing and more supports for renters. Programs that support youth, seniors, and vulnerable populations. And safer neighborhoods. Hence, the increase in the Toronto Police Service budget and more boots on the ground, and which will bring safer neighborhoods, all of which this budget invests in. This budget also invests in expanding the student nutrition program in our schools and city camps. And again, that's something that is really important to me as chair of the Board of Health and a former school board trustee. So this ship is very big. The cities is, a big ship. It's very hard to turn, but I hope you would agree that over the past year and a half, we have started to see tangible positive changes, and we'll continue to see positive continued changes going forward. In Toronto Centre, we also have a lot of capital investments being made, including Young People's Theatre, heritage lighting, St. Lawrence Library relocation and expansion design, Market Lane Parquet construction, a new electric Zamboni and storage hut for Regent Park, Anishinaabe Miswibik Child Care Center, an enhanced state of good repair for the St. Lawrence Center for the Arts, which will include public realm improvements around the center itself, several street and laneway resurfacing and redesign projects, 4 of which we are doing in partnership with Laneway Project. And George Street revitalization construction will finally begin by the end of this year. So there's a lot of things happening in the ward, and I'm really excited, to see these things happen over the next year. And so it's great. So that's it for me for now, but I'm going to pass over to our staff to give you some highlights of the budget itself. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, members of public. I'm very excited to be here, and this is not my first time. This is actually my 3rd time coming to this town hall meeting. I'm just like every one of you. I also live in downtown Toronto. It happens to be in Councillor Moy's ward as well. So let me introduce myself. I'm Anthony Ng, and I work for the city over almost 20 years in financial planning division. So today I'm going to start with the presentation, a high-level overview about this budget, and I will get into a little bit more about operating, followed by Mervyn, my colleague. He is going to finish the presentation with more details about the capital budget, the 10-year capital plan, as part of this budget process. I just want to, I'm going to, next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, great. So let me give you some background information. In 2024 budget, when I was here to present the information, last year the budget was largely based on 3 guiding principles. Our city long-term financial plan, the Ontario and Toronto government New Deal, and also largely is the public consultation. That was how last year we developed the budget. So it was very successful. And then we continue this momentum for the 2025 budget. So on Monday, so the city staff, since the staff prepared budget, we present the balanced budget, for 2025 to the budget committee. So this staff budget addressed financial challenges, of $1.2 billion opening pressure through a multi-year approach, and is demonstrating positive progress from last year. So let me share with you some key figures on this slide. $18.8 billion, which is our operating budget, represent total gross budget for tax supported programs and rate support programs. Our 10-year capital plan, which is almost $60 billion, represent $10 billion additional investment when compared to the last year. Our 2025 operating budget is supported by the 5.4% increase in the residential property tax, plus the 1.5% increase in the city building fund, for a total of 6.9% increase in property tax for this year. In addition, this budget definitely maintained this existing service and services level, but the city is also able, to invest more, do more, like in the new and enhanced initiative, totaling $94 million, which I will provide more details later. Next slide, please. This staff prepared budget continues a multi-year approach for the city to achieve financial stability and sustainability too. It reflects the input from public consult that was done in October last year. And also, it builds on the city long-term financial plan and the 3-year New Deal arrangement with the province of Ontario. For staff, it also incorporates reductions and offsets by way of line-by-line review, efficiency savings, in-depth program and agency review, and also some revenue adjustment to get to this budget. Next slide, please. Let me share with you some context. We know that Toronto is the largest contributor, to the Canadian economy. We represent about 20% of the GDP. We still have the most construction cranes in North America, and we have been held this title for a number of years. Toronto has more than $3.2 million population. The demographic is very diverse, and more than 50% are born outside of Canada. Also, one key point I want to share is this: for all the tax we pay, throughout the year, local government, which is the City of Toronto, we only receive around 9 to 10 cents for every dollar paid. The remaining portion of the tax dollar goes to the federal and also the provincial government. Next, please. Like other municipalities, we have very limited revenue tools within our control. We heavily rely on property tax revenue. Unlike sales tax, income tax is relatively static. While there is a limited natural growth in our revenue base, we continue to experience added costs to deliver municipal services, as well as growing demand for our services driven by population growth, which I mentioned, and also our aging population, aging demographic. On top of that, Toronto has a very unique challenges above and beyond other municipalities, arising from the operation of the largest transit system, which is the TTC in the country, and increasing demands and complexity of our shelter, and also social services because our demographic and also our profiles in the city. So for staff, as we begin to work on 2025 budget, we had to consider these challenges and these complexities. We bring forward a balanced budget so that this budget, is relevant and unique to the municipal budgeting, also unique to the City of Toronto itself. Next page, please. So what we have done in 2024. So this slide is like a recap, for the investment, because council approved 9.5% the residential property tax increases, including the CPF last year. So with this money, the city council has invested in what matters to Torontonian. So making life more affordable, getting Toronto moving, keeping people safe, and providing more community services. To illustrate, the added investment enabled the city to increase staffing in emergency services for public safety, for example, increase transit service hours, free transit fares in 2024, and provide more accessible wrap-around community services, ranging from library hours and more community recreation programming. Next page. As I mentioned earlier, and also echo the budget chair and the mayor, in October 2024, we undertake another round of a public consultation, and to continue that momentum. So that public consultation was initiated by the mayor and the budget chair. So we host a month-long engagement campaign, including online survey and various consultation sessions across the city. The city received over 12,000 responses to the budget survey. We also get the chance to meet over 700 participants in 6 different sessions across the city, including in person and also virtuals. Also, we have additional 330 participants join at the local meeting hosted by the community-based organizations across the city with indigenous, Black and equity deserving communities to solicit all this input to develop the budget. Okay. Next slide, please. So now I can give you get into the operating budget highlights. We begin the process with $1.2 billion in opening pressure. And this has been addressed through continued actions about the long-term financial plan, bridging strategies. Even though they're temporary measures, we call bridging strategies, consistent with our multi-year approach. Staff identified for a total of $600 million reduction and offsets, through the staff internal review process. And lastly, which is our last resort, which is the budget is supported by the 5.4% increase in residential property tax to support this operating budget. This budget, I will get to you more. We'll give you more example about the new and enhancement, about the $94 million based on the input, from the public consultations. Next. $18.8 billion operating budget. It is comprised of two major components. We have a tax-supported operating budget, and also we have the rate support operating budget. So the tax-supported operating budget is funded by the property tax, and for the rate supported budgets, those are funded by the user fee utility rates, which includes, for example, Toronto Water, your solid waste management services, and also Toronto Parking Authority. So this is for a total of $18.8 billion. When compared to 2024, the increase is about $1.8 billion higher than 2024 in terms of the expenditure. Next, please. Okay, so look at the spending in this slide. Show the total gross expenditure and also net expenditure budget for 2025. So with the full length of the bar describing the total spend of 2025, and the yellow bars represent the amount of property tax funding dedicated to delivering these services. As reflected in this slide, we continue to spend a significant amount on the city's cost-sharing program. So in total, we spent about $5.1 billion gross expenditure in 2025. These programs include, for example, working collaboratively with the other orders of government, like Toronto Employment and Social Services, Children's Services, Shelter Services, Housing, Toronto Community Housing Corporation, and also like a long-term care, and also Toronto Public Health as well. The revenue up the bottom in here is the net budget. The yellow bar is the net budget funded by the property tax. But the blue bar, the length of the blue bar here is represent the total expenditure. The revenue, let me see my slide. So interesting. It is not on my slide.
It's revenue then.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it should be the yellow bar. It should be the net budget. The blue bar, the length, it should be the gross expenditure, but the revenue budget. So I don't know what I cannot see on my slide. Okay, I'll fix that. Thank you for letting me know. Sorry about that. Next slide, please. Okay. You may be familiar with this picture, with this slide, if you attend the public consultation and also last year budget process. So this is an updated version of the slide we use frequently during the budget process, but it illustrates the budget challenges facing Toronto in 2025. So the large red tower, that you see on the left-hand side of the graph, it represents the scale, the opening budget pressure of $1.2 billion. So in this budget, there's another number that is very interesting, is every 1% property tax increases, it will generate $46.4 million revenue. Annual revenue to the city of Toronto. So to provide the perspective, to fully offset, the red bar, the column, the $1.2 billion pressure through a property tax increases alone, it will have required a 26% residential property tax increases. Alternatively, if we were asked to have approached the 2025 budget challenge through a program service reduction, we would need to eliminate the expenditures equivalent, to the full cost of the TTC transit service in the city. That would include the subway, streetcar, bus, rail transit services to bring forward a balanced budget. Apparently, we didn't take that approach. So I will take you through the approach that we have taken to bring forward a balanced budget in the next slide. Okay, staff had taken the 5 key balancing actions. So first, as we always do during the budget process, so staff reviewed the budget submissions received from each city divisions and also agencies, and already identified potential opportunities for offset, efficiencies, and other revenues actions during the internal review process. So collectively, we have identified $680 million in reductions and offsets. And the second action that we took is include $41 million achieved through actions implemented through the long-term financial plan. That includes added revenue from the graduated municipal lands transfer tax on the high-value homes, and also revenue expected from the newly implemented non-residential speculation tax in 2025. Next, our balancing actions account for $330 million in multi-year bridging strategies. These temporary measures include the planned reserve draws that was intended to be temporary measures and will be replaced in the next year through the budget process to be funded by the property tax. So we will have to strategically manage this pressure we face over the next few years. Fourth, the 2025 operating budget incorporates $251 million in additional revenue from the property tax. And lastly, in this budget, we also assume funding support from the other levels of government. In this case, we include additional $50 million from the federal government to offset our refugee claimant response in the city. So this page will highlight the $94 million investment that we make in new and enhanced. So we put these investment into major themes in this slide. And these themes coincide with what we see in the public consultations that we did in October last year. So we talk about affordable. So focus on affordable housing for costs associated with transit, childcare, and food. We need to make sure that we get Toronto moving. So expanding and improving the reliability and accessibility of TTC for all, from transit to subway to streetcar. And also we put a lot of money in terms of the traffic warden to address the traffic congestions management, providing more community services, more programming at park, libraries open 7 days a week, including Sunday, and community centers, as well as climate actions program. Keep people safe, prioritize violence prevention, and proactive measure, as well as increased funding for the emergency services. In total, we add about 276 staff complement, within Toronto Fire, paramedic, and also Toronto Police. So next slide, I will give you a little bit more detail about the property tax that we are proposing. So this budget incorporate 5.4%, which I mentioned a few times. So what does that mean? So it is equivalent to an annual increase of $210 for average home. So based on the assess value, about $692,000 for the assess home value. So about $210 annual increase. It is equivalent to about $17.50 per month. The city, keeping in mind, the city also continues maintain a couple property tax relief program, we have a tax increase deferral program or property tax increase cancellation program. So those programs, continue to be provided, for individuals or household who are eligible. So in 2024, about 10,000 households benefit from this program. And since the introduction of these two programs in 2025, the city has provided over $44 million in property tax relief to people who are in need. For multi-residential properties, the budget increases will be half of the residential property tax. So you can see this chart, it only shows 2.7% for the property tax increases. We also have introduced a new multi-residential subclass, which is available for new multi-residential developments, provide 15% reduction from the current residential rate. For commercial or industrial, we also, we're also seeing the increases in the property tax. So industrial will be the same as the residential, 5.4%, and commercial will be half of it, which is the 2.7%. The city continue to maintain the small business property subclass, which the city provide 15% rate reduction for eligible properties. So just for this small business subclass program, currently there are about 28,000 small business benefit from this program with the 15% rate reduction. Next slide. After the property tax, we will talk a little bit about our utility rates, which is the Toronto Water, the water bill, and also the solid waste. So this prepared budget before you today, we confirms the utility rates, this is which is 3.75%. So this will increase the average household about $39 based on the average consumption. And also it will increase in terms of the garbage bin, it will also increase about $11 to $21 for a single family home. Of course, depending on the size of the garbage bin. So that is based on the 3.75%. For the next session, it will be about the 10-year capital plan, and I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Mervyn.
Thank you, Anthony, and good evening, everyone. I'm here to present the 10-year capital plan. So the 10-year, just an overview, the 10-year capital plan is nearly $60 billion. This is the largest capital plan ever in the city. And as previously mentioned, this represents a $10 billion increase from last year's 10-year plan, which is about a 20% increase from last year. So some of the key takeaways for this plan is that it prioritizes key investments in state of good repair to maintain our assets in a state of good repair. And it also focuses on climate actions aimed at reducing 240,000 tons of CO2 emissions. This is all prepared in a financially sustainable way by leveraging a 1.5% increase in the City Building Fund levy, and also while maintaining our debt service ratio under 15%. Next slide. The 10-year capital plan, I'm not sure what happened with the slide, but 2/3 of this pie chart is tax supported, while 1/3 is rate supported. And so our rate supported programs are Toronto Water, Solid Waste, and Toronto Parking Authority. We could go to the next slide. And so here you can see, I'm not sure what. This chart is supposed to illustrate what our capital plan is really spent on, the different services that we deliver through the 10-year capital plan. And so as you can see, the top bar is $17.6 billion or 28%, which is dedicated towards Toronto Water. And so this goes towards water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure, and is funded completely by the Toronto Water rate and has no reliance on the property tax base. The largest property tax base funded program is transit. And so that is $17 billion or 26% of funding that goes towards the TTC, which pays for our subway, our streetcars, our buses, and to support the overall transit network. Additionally, $4.5 billion goes towards housing, coupled with a further $4.5 billion that we have in foregone revenues, which it was used to incentivize affordable housing development. We also invest a further $6.1 billion in transportation and mobility through investments in road and bridge rehabilitation. And we also invest $5.2 billion in environment and recreation initiatives, which includes investments in parks, waterfront revitalization, and environment and energy. Next slide. As mentioned, the capital plan has an added 1.5% increase to the city building fund levy. Would result in a annual increase of $58 for the average home. The city building fund is a levy that supports transit and housing investments in the capital plan. In 2025, the city building fund is expected to generate $384 million in revenue. To date, this levy has supported $1.4 billion in capital investments, and it will support an additional $8.5 billion in investments over the 10-year capital plan. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the capital plan has increased by $10 billion compared to last year. So what's included in that $10 billion? Well, nearly half of it is going towards keeping Toronto moving. And so that's critical investments in the TTC and in transportation services. So for the TTC, those added investments include $1.3 billion for the 55 new trains for Line 2, $1.2 billion for 700 e-buses and the related charging infrastructure, $1 billion for critical repairs on our subway system. That includes things like signaling, electrical and communication systems, and a further $500 million for our bus, streetcar, and subway car overhauls. And at the same time, we're also making added investments in transportation services with $380 million for bridge and road rehabilitation. Next slide. Aside from keeping Toronto moving, we're also investing $2 billion in added investments for housing and community improvements. So this includes $400 million in state of good repair funding for our recreational facilities, about $350 million in direct investments and incentives to enable housing supply and to build more affordable homes. We also have $300 million for repairs in TCHC buildings and $223 million to continue to advance our homelessness services capital infrastructure strategy. Next slide. So all these critical investments in state of good repair really have a positive impact. In the slide, the red line represents last year's state of good repair backlog, and the blue line represents this year's state of good repair backlog. As you can see, the backlog still does continue to increase. However, the rate at which it increased is at a much lower rate. We're flattening the curve on the SOGR backlog, and that's a step in the right direction. Next slide. That's overall across the city. So in conclusion, the city continues our multi-year approach to enhance financial sustainability. The budget reflects feedback from Torontonians, as well as our shared partnership with other levels of government. The $18.8 billion operating budget that Anthony spoke about maintains our critical services and service levels, while also making additional investments to make life affordable, provide community services, keep Toronto moving, and to keep people safe. The $60 billion capital 10-year capital plan continues to prioritize investments in state of good repair in order to flatten that SOGR backlog curve, and also makes critical investments in housing, transit, and the environment, all in a financially sustainable way. Next slide. We encourage you all to get involved with the budget and to provide your feedback and input through telephone town halls, through budget committee meetings next week on January 21st and 22nd, and through written feedback to the budget committee. And you can also contact your local councillor to provide feedback. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mervyn and Anthony. So we did hand out some paper to those here in the room. So if you want to pass it to one of our staff, and then we can go through it. So we'll alternate between answering a question in the room and one online. So perhaps one of our staff can go around and collect the paper. I see one over there. There's a basket over there. They'll come to you. Perhaps Deputy Mayor Malik can read it, or does staff want to read it? Okay. Our staff will sort through them and put them in some sort of bunches.
Yep. So we'll start with some of the online questions. So the first one is from Linda Shields from Ward 10. What other revenue tools aside from property taxes is the city using in this budget?
Thanks for the question. As I mentioned earlier, most of the revenue tools that we have is very limited, and also within the City of Toronto control, because under the current governance, legislatively, all the new revenue tools that we are exploring and eventually that we can get implement, it has to get the permission from the Ontario government. So, but for this budget, we continue the graduated municipal land transfer tax, which is a higher tax rate for home value, more than $3 million. So we will continue this one. And also, we introduced a brand new tax, which is called a non-residential speculation tax. So this is the recommendation, a couple of years ago as part of the long-term financial plan. And then this is the new tax revenue that we introduced as part of this budget to address our budget pressure. So the rest of them, besides the tax revenue, the major revenue source for the City of Toronto is user fee. If you can imagine, especially for TTC, the major, you pay the fare box revenue. So that is the major, like something like that, that will be the user fee revenues that will help the city to balance the budget. We also continue to rely on the other intergovernmental funding, through the new deal with the province, the funding. So that is the major key components about the revenue source for the Toronto.
Okay, sorry, the next one is more of a comment from Bruce Van Deeten from Ward 10. I hope we can make investments in enforcement. We make bylaws and then no one enforces them. Is there can you speak to if there's oh, you heard it, okay. Sorry, we're just getting answers to that question. The next one, Jessica Wilson from Ward 10 as well. My question pertains to, and I've Jessica, just so you know, I've distilled your comment a bit because it was quite long, but hopefully I got in the spirit of it. My question pertains to the disgraceful state of our streets and sidewalks. And so the question is, what investments are in this budget for making our streets and sidewalks cleaner?
Sorry, Tyler, can you repeat the questions?
Yeah, so the the first one about the bylaw enforcement?
But the bylaw one, the bylaw enforcement investment, I have the information. In this budget, in MLS, municipal licensing and standards, we have added additional investment, about $1.3 million, for the purpose with the 10 positions to support the rent safe TO program for tenants. So the funding, for this one, is fully supported by the increase in the user fee, for apartment buildings, to fund this program. So that is the additional staff, to protect the renter, across the city.
Thank you. And the second one was about the state of the streets and sidewalks. What investments in this budget are there for making our streets and sidewalks cleaner?
Those will be this will be more on the capital investment.
So in this budget, we do have additional supports for transportation service. We do have additional supports for transportation services in order to help sustain their budget for their existing program. Currently in 2024, some of their resources were really being redirected towards other programs such as Cafe TO. And so now as we have dedicated funding for these programs and we're putting the right bodies in place, those initial positions or those initial workers that were supporting these other programs that we've asked to take on, they can now support their initial role of funding street sweeping and street cleaning. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. So, thank you. Sorry, I'm also just going to go back to the first question that I asked because I don't think it was answered properly. The question was, what other revenue tools aside from property taxes is the city using in this budget? And I guess coupled with that, because we have another question from someone in the room, is what is the likelihood of the commercial parking levy? And what is the status of that? So are there other revenue tools that the city is using? And then the question about the commercial parking levy.
Okay, in terms of other revenue tools besides the property tax increase, so currently we have land transfer tax, we have vacant home tax, we have municipal accommodation tax. And as I mentioned, we have a new, non-residential speculation tax. So these revenue tools are outside the regular residential property tax, to help the city to address our operating budget pressure, and also, to some extent, it will also help us to fund some capital programs specifically to housing. So, and then also, as I mentioned, user fees, which is also the important revenue source to the city. So our revenue source is very limited, within our control, in terms of the taxation. The upload of the Gardiner DVP and also Don Valley, the DVP and also the Gardiner. So that was part of the new deal. We're talking about $1.9 billion. Those will help us, the city, in this budget, to address the 10-year capital plan. Upload to the province of Ontario. Thank you. So that address, our, and then this funding, are being reallocated, to address the state of good repair in many ways. And that will benefit the transit, TTC, transportation, our city facilities, parks, forestry, and recreation, and also Toronto Housing, TCHC Corporation, that they all benefit, through this reallocation to increase additional funding to address the SOGR backlog. So that's why you can see the last chart in the presentation, our state of good repair backlog, the slope has decreased when compared to the last year, then that is one of the reasons.
Thank you. And just one last question while we're on this topic of property taxes and revenue. And then I'll move to environment. Did the city staff, would city staff consider increasing the property taxes on higher valued homes or ultra rich homes, and give regular homeowners a bit of a break? So sort of, would the city consider a graduated property tax system?
Since last year, we already have a graduated municipal land transfer tax for home value greater than $3 million. The city collect additional, impose additional percentage increases for those transactions in the municipal land transfer tax. So that additional increase, has been implemented since last year, and then we continue to do so based on the council direction and the policy.
And what about property taxes themselves, not just the land transfer tax?
It will be the same. There is no break in terms of that.
Thank you. This question is from the room, Gail Farley from Ward 10. Can you expand on what the money for environment and climate is for? Toronto's greenhouse gases continue to go up. Last summer, flooding cost the city and residents billions of dollars. Like a lot of money. So can you expand on what money is invested in environment and climate? And I guess,
I have to go to the details, but as part of this budget, we invest a lot in the climate, both operating and capital. In our budget website, which is part of the public information, we have a specific briefing note prepared by our colleagues in Environment and Climate Division, highlighting the amount of investment in operating and capital. There's a tape. So give you example. A key figure in this budget, we reduced based on the environmental impact assessment. This budget from capital and operating all together, we are forecast to be able to reduce the carbon, the GHG reduction in 160,000 tons. The investment that the city make in this budget in terms of the capital, we are talking about almost like a $16 billion over the 10-year period that we have invest associated with the climate. In operating in this budget, we have about $78 million across the city division, to advance the environmental climate resiliency and also carbon CO2 reduction. So this investment mainly is around the city building, about the transportation, and also the e-bus. Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, thank you. Especially in a particular TDC, the e-bus, that is the major contributor, to the success of the CO2 of the GHG reduction.
Okay, thank you. This is another question from Zach. How much money is the Mura program getting in this budget? And I guess I'll just add on to that for them.
Sorry.
I'm just adding kind of on just to get them a bit better of an answer is, do you know what the increase is this year compared to last year for the Mura program? The multi...
Mura program, which is the multi-residential unit, residential acquisition program.
Yes.
It is 45. My recollection vaguely is about $40 million.
And is that how much of an increase from last year?
$40 million is from last year, the 10-year capital plan. And this year, we have increased the total investment over the 10-year period about $100 million. That is budgeted within the Housing Secretary 10-year capital plan.
So last year was
$40 million, and this year, for over the 10-year period, we increased the investment from $40 to $100 million.
This is one. Okay. No, that's. My mic is off, sorry. So the next question is from Tony from Ward 10. When will the 5% or 50%? 50% reduction in commercial and
think and commercial and
I guess to bring it in line with homeowners' property taxes. So, like, I think you explained that there's different property tax levels. So there's commercial and industrial, and so
yes.
when are those ever going to be closer to each other?
Right. Yes. Currently, based on the, it is guided by the legislation. The industrial and residential, they're the same, 5.4%. But for commercial, they are half because of the legislation. And the City of Toronto just followed the legislation. So that's why commercial right now is only at 2.7%. And then if we want to make any changes, it will be a policy change, and then they have to go through the province for the legislation amendment.
Can you explain? Sorry, this next one is from Anit from Ward 13. And so after decreasing red tape on building housing and increasing housing supply, how will rent prices be able to stay affordable without rent control on the new buildings? Are the buildings that the city is buying, I guess as part of the MURA program, or that we're building, are they just for low-income residents, and how are we protecting those? Is there rent control in those buildings?
For our city buildings, sorry, if my memory serves me correctly, the building that we build as a city, they are rent control buildings. But if they are private developers who build them, then they have no rent control. Okay.
And then the second question that they had was, will increased funding for police be extended to the TTC where people have felt unsafe on transportation? So I guess to sort of reword the question, what safety improvements are and enhancements and investments are being made on the TTC?
So the TTC's budget continues a $100 million investment from the New Deal funding from the province for safety and security measures. So that includes the safety representatives that you see at different stations. There's also 10 additional outreach workers for street-to-home outreach workers that's supported through Shelter's budget that will be on TTC streetcars to help people who are experiencing homelessness to transition to the shelter system to help everyone feel safe. There are additional measures as well, investments, about $15 million on the capital side that help with cleanliness in different stations, a pilot that's going to be undertaken to help the overall environment feel cleaner and safer as well.
The next question is from Sonia from Ward 10. So the budget chief said that safety doesn't just mean policing, and then they were shown a budget with an astronomical police budget increase. So we get 1/4 of social services. So what mechanisms are being put in place to increase safety? And how does having more boots on the ground mean safer communities and not just more policing? So I guess I would also help them along in asking what other non-policing alternatives have been invested in through this city budget.
Besides policing, the city continue to put greater focus on the Toronto Community Crisis Response Program. Okay, so this is a non-policing component that the city has made investment and continue to expand citywide. This program, since 2024 budget. That is, and the outcome is very positive without the police presence, and also depends on the nature of the event and of the incidents. There will be a wraparound services provided, to the people who are in needs, through these services. So this investment it's not just about the police. It's nothing to do with the Toronto police increases. And this program, we as a city believe, is the wraparound services that we offer to the public, who are in this, in this nature.
I also want to add too, we've also added the core program, which is right downtown around the Yonge Dundas intersection area, where Toronto Public Health is partnered with Toronto Police to actually preemptively go out into the community and try to help those that are in crisis. I also want to add to that, in regards to the police budget, we're going to have more neighborhood officers. We have four more neighborhoods that will have neighborhood officers go on foot and on bikes to actually engage community. And that's what been asked for. Also, to per capita, Toronto is actually has less police than any other in the country. So again, it's really trying to go back to an area that we need to. As mentioned again, our city has grown substantially. We had 3.2 million people, and it continues to grow. So we are trying to get ahead. Actually, we're very behind, and we're trying to catch up to a place where, we can keep our citizens safe. And also, too, keep in mind, too, the police don't only just enforce the law. They also help people that are underhoused as well, people who are overdosed and all those things. It's all about community policing. Policing has changed quite a bit.
I do want to just say a few words about that, because it's also something that, as we've been getting communication about the budget, our communities are asking as well. And the investment in emergency services, I think the mayor mentioned it, is 276 additional emergency services. That also means fire, paramedics, and the Toronto Community Crisis Response. And what was really important last year was the expansion of the Toronto Community Crisis Response Program to the entire city. And we know that all of our emergency services have to do what they are uniquely equipped to do, and to be able to respond to people in crisis with not just mental health, but crisis in general is a huge game changer in our city. And that means for all of us who ride transit in our communities, that's really, really important. And there's also a number of investments in youth violence programs, and also the expansion of road safety programs. So we are seeing $92 million in Vision Zero investments and projects, which is also about safety in our city. It's how we move around, and especially in our downtowns where we're all moving. It's cars, it's transit, it's pedestrians, cyclists, and everyone else. And of course, when we talk about housing, when we talk about transit that's accessible, and when we talk about community services, being able to access internet at a library, being able to go to your community center after hours, and having a meal for kids in schools, we're talking about a more equal city and a more equitable city. And we know the data tells us over and over again, when we close that inequality gap, when we make our cities more equal, that's how we make them safer as well. And we know in Toronto, people are struggling, and it is very serious. And that means that when we make investments in our public services alongside those very immediate and frontline interventions, that's what we're talking about when we talk about community safety, is that full complement of supports and services that we can be proud of.
Thank you. The next question is actually, similar vein, similar subject. So why is there an emphasis on policing in the budget rather than prioritizing housing and safe consumption site funding? And I guess you kind of did answer that, but if there's any additional.
So again, housing is a priority to us at the city. We've invested quite a few investments in housing. We've created a lot of housing stock, and we continue to do that. We have added money to the budget for our TSSS, Toronto Shelter Services, among other things. It's a priority to the mayor and to this council. When it comes to safe consumption sites, that is healthcare, as you know, and that's a provincial responsibility. But that being said, though, I've been very vocal as chair of the Board of Health in that we need to continue to make sure that safe consumption sites do continue. They are important. They do save lives. In Toronto Centre alone, we have 5 safe consumption sites. And my concern is that if or when they close as of March 31st, we'll see more activity in our streets in regards to people overdosing. And we know that, it will overwhelm our police service, our paramedic services, and also our EMS. So I've been proactively talking to various divisions to try to address this urgent issue. I hope the province changes their mind, but we'll see. We've also engaged with some community partners to see if we could actually bring a court challenge to see if we could actually reverse this this law that was brought forth.
Yeah, so sorry, and that was actually the next question. So the question is cooperative housing part of the city's housing plan?
It is not at this time. Co-op housing is a federal initiative, not a city initiative. The funding for that historically has come from the federal government. We'd like to see more co-op housing. I think, have the per capita have the most co-op housing in Toronto Centre. And we know that works. And so we'd like to see more of that. But that is not a city initiative. That is a federal initiative.
The next question is also about housing. We've tried to group questions here. So why is the housing wait list so long, and why is it not being, reduced? Continues to grow.
I mean, investments in housing has been at a pause for a very, very long time. And so now the system is overwhelmed. Last year, for example, the last couple of years, 50% of people in our shelters are refugees. And as a result of that, there's a backlog in people in our parks. It has been a real issue. And I know the mayor and others have actually engaged the federal government and the provincial government to try to address this issue. Again, when it comes to refugees, that's the funding comes from the federal government. And we have worked with other municipalities as well in the GTHA to try to actually relocate people into welcoming centers. We worked with, for example, with Mayor Patrick Brown in Brampton and tried to have a welcoming center there. And that's going to be opening soon if it hasn't opened already, just to redirect people across the province rather than in Toronto. So those are the things, some of the things we're trying to do. And of course, even during this winter months, we have opened up the Inacure Center. We've opened up other warming centers in the core. And so it's something that we have all hands on deck trying to deal with. But again, as you know, housing cannot be built overnight. We have, this council and this mayor have worked really hard to bring more housing stock across the city. One of the things that we have done is that we've removed the option for councillors to actually decide where they have housing, if they want it or not in their wards. We've delegated that responsibility to staff, and staff has been proactively going out and building housing across the city. So I'm hoping over time, we'll see less people on the streets and more housing across the city.
Thank you for that. And that's really helpful, Councillor Moyes. I just want to be real with everyone and just stress how severe the underinvestment in housing has been, not over the last few years, we're talking decades. There have been choices made by previous administrations right here at City Hall, provincially and federally, to underinvest in housing, to leave it to market forces alone, to not look at housing as a right. And what we see now with this housing crisis is a crisis made over many choices over many years. And for us to collectively, the work that we do with and for our communities and as a council, to take this seriously, to look at this crisis like straight in the eye, and to make those moves has been really, really critical. So the continued and historic investments that the city has been making in affordable housing and purpose-built rental, and using every tool that we have, looking at our own city lands to build. And that's what there was a question here about what do we do when we don't have the powers around rent control? What we can do, and what the city is embracing, our housing secretariat is looking at every option. I was actually with Councillor Moyes last year at an announcement where literally 8 parking spots were being made into affordable housing that was going to be kept affordable for forever, right? And that is really critical, that we're using every tool that we have to be a builder and to work with nonprofit organizations to operate those buildings and to keep them affordable in perpetuity. That's something that I'm really proud that we're bringing to projects that are really big and ambitious and wonderful, like Quayside, and to our local communities as well. It's really, really important. And there was a question about the multi-unit residential acquisition program. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. It's a program that I fought for a very modest allocation when our term first began. And it was so important that there was a historic investment in that program. And it speaks to the point that Councillor Moyes made, that we are going to build housing and it doesn't happen tomorrow. But what the multi-unit residential acquisition program does is that it makes sure that the city has money set aside when rental buildings come onto the market, where the city can acquire those buildings and ensure that we keep them affordable forever. That means that while we are building and making our commitment to affordable housing and purpose-built rental, we are also not letting the stock that exists in the city go as much as we can, right? And you heard from Anthony, the $40 million investment last year and the historic $100 million investment over 10 years is really important. And we know with the cost of housing and building and inflation and all of that, that maybe we would want more and for it to go further. But thanks to the advocacy of so many and the effectiveness of that program, we are using tools like that as well, that while we build and we make some important measures when it comes to development and growth in the city, we're also holding on to what we've got.
I also want to add as well, just to remind folks as well, we spend $1.7 billion a year on housing, including TCHC and other housing initiatives. So we do invest in housing in the city. We are the largest landlords in the country through TCHC.
Okay, I'm just going to also add a small commentary because as someone who kind of goes through these policy documents over the last couple of weeks, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario have come out with a great report about how municipalities are carrying the burden of building housing, and municipalities across Ontario are paying 62%, and yet the provincial and federal governments are not there. And also, if you start looking at the charts of when housing and homelessness really started to, it's always been an issue, but when it really started to become a real crisis is around 2019, 2020, when the province got rid of rent control. And so now people are falling into arrears, people are being evicted, and then the city has to step in with the rent bank and with additional shelter beds and housing support. So all of those things kind of come together. And so if there is a provincial and federal election this year coming shortly, it's great questions to also ask them. Sorry for my commentary, but okay, so the next question is about about the shelter budget. the operating budget, the net operating budget for shelter services has increased 177% from 2023 to 2024, and the budget outlook for 2025 is north of 800 million. And as same thing with the capital budget, it's continuously increasing. So how does the city, spend all of this, but then there's not a lot of results?
For shelter budget this year, the capacity has increased through the operating budget. Last year, the budget for shelter space throughout the year, we could only support about 10,500 or 600 bed. Okay, but in this budget of 2025, we have additional investment, and the credit also, goes to the provincial and the federal government, through the New Deal and also the federal money assumption, to support our refugee as part of the refugee response. So in this budget, our system, can accommodate, 12,300 beds. As part of this 2025 budget, which is the significant increase when compared to the 2024. That's operating. In terms of the capital side, shelter budget, there's a strategy adopted by City Council, HSCIS, which is, the plan is to build infrastructure. And the full plan, if upon completion, the city will be able to build 20 more shelter sites. And then each site has about 80 beds or some, for a total of 1,600 across the city. And of course, right now the budget in the shelter, we are able to advance about 6 to 7 sites, including acquisition, design, and construction. It will take some time to build and then for the project to be complete. And then we continue, to that momentum, to add more investment, in the future year budget submission and the budget process, to advance the strategy.
Just building on that, and I guess building on your comment as well about other levels of government. One of the really important programs that the city administers, but that has been an important investment from the provincial and federal governments, is the Canada-Ontario Housing Benefit. And that money allows people who are in the shelter system to get a start at accessing market housing, getting an apartment. And with the diversity of folks who, and their situations in the shelter system, there are a number of folks who should be able to access that money. And when it was flowing, we saw hundreds of people being able to be moved out of the shelter system and alleviating some of that pressure to allow us to move folks into the shelter system and put them on that path to permanent housing or more appropriate housing. And at as we got to the halfway point in the year, the funding stopped flowing from the provincial government for that program. And what that meant was a continued increase to the backlog of folks who were moving out of the shelter system, adding to some of those pressures and adding to the need that we continue to have on our shelter and housing system. But it becomes even greater when we don't have that consistent partnership and commitment from other levels of government. And finally, when that money did flow, we were looking at about 2,000 people who could have been moved out sooner, kind of then having to be quickly kind of moved through the program. So again, as we're thinking about how we do this collaboratively, how we make the most of the resources and the investments that we're making in the city, where other levels of government have stepped up to make sure programs like the Canada-Ontario Housing Benefit are consistent and made permanent, because we know they make a difference, and we have shown that we can responsibly administer them in order to maximize, what the limited resources that we do have, especially on this issue.
In regards to TCAC SOGR, as a result of the upload of the DVP and the Gardner, $30 million allocated to TCAC over the next 10 years. So that's also helpful.
Okay, so the next question is actually about the capital budget. So David from Ward 10 commends you for finding $680 million in efficiencies in the $18 billion operating budget. Their concern is capital budget, though. So one, the city is infamous for coming in over budget, and how do we stop that? So what are some of the reasons why the city is constantly over budget on some of the capital projects? And and how do we stop kind of the wasteful spending? Yes.
I'll speed up to a beat here. So I don't know how many of you have traveled north on the TTC, north of Shepherd West to Vaughan, Highway 7, Finch West, Pioneer Village Station, York University Station. These are palaces. You could have built 3 stations for each one of them. Okay, they serve a fraction of the number of passengers that King Station does, which is a hole in the ground. Okay, I've been a Torontonian for 58 of my 60 years, and I know I don't look a day over 35, but I've traveled in every single station. Okay, I've traveled to the London tube system, and they're just stations for people to come and go. They don't need palaces. I go to Pioneer Village every Friday night to play hockey. I take Union Station, TTC all the way up, okay? And I go through tiny stations, and then you get up there, and they're palaces, literally palaces. So I don't know if either of you have gone there, or if any of you have gone there, but take a trip up there and see where the money has gone. So $3 billion was spent to build those. And I'll here's just a little spec. So Pioneer Village Station has a $2 million piece of artwork that's never worked, that nobody even knows exists. And why is that important? Because for that money, 39 Dundalk Drive was built for $3 million.
Sorry, sir.
Within a year and a half, that housed 50 people. So a $3 billion project, save 1% of that.
Excuse me.
$3 billion. We built 10 of these things. Okay, and that's the problem, is the city wastes money. And this is in an argument. It's like specs, this is Esplanade. I used to live on the Esplanade.
Sir.
Painted it red. It's now been dug up, and we're gonna paint it red again. Nobody knows what red means, because people are still going the wrong way on this street. Why did we spend money to paint it red? Okay, Kennedy Road also.
Okay.
Okay, I think you made your point. I think
HOV names are not painted, but people know that they don't have to use them. It's little things like this that will add up to tens of millions of dollars that can build 100 of these.
As most Torontonians know, and as most people in this province knows, it's Metrolinx who actually builds transit, not the city. For example, I'm speaking. For example, the Eglinton LRT, the Finch LRT, and the extension and the Ontario line and the extension of our subways is Metrolinx who actually pay for it. We operate it. They hand it over to us after they build it, but it's the province who actually covers the cost of that, and the feds.
Yeah. So.
We are spending money.
Anthony, there's just one last question that I think that we can squeeze in, and I think it's a good one to kind of explain how at the beginning we always talk about the opening budget pressure. Where does that come from, and like how is that determined every year at the beginning of the year? We say we have an opening pressure, and where does that come from?
Thanks for the questions. Every year before pandemic, the city normally, we have to deal with about $600–700 million budget pressure. During the COVID time, the numbers has gone up exponentially. We were dealing with the budget pressure just like last. For example, if you remember the number, we're dealing with $1.8 billion. $1.8 billion operating budget pressures. Every year we have a base budget. We have some, just like, your household, you have some base expenditure. We also, just like anyone, we have to deal with contracts, inflationary increases. Also the salaries and benefit increases, for the city staff, to provide the services. And we also use one-time measures, last year during the budget process that will have an impact in the following year, right now, in 2025, that we have to address. This is what we call the multi-year approach, to address the budget pressure. So that's why all these add up, at the starting point to maintain the existing level of services. We are dealing with $1.2 billion budget pressure citywide. We have 55 divisions and agencies. Our City of Toronto, our services are very diverse. No other city will have to have have the biggest, transit system, just like, TTC, no other municipalities, they would do, for example, like zoo. We have Toronto Zoo. So our services, to the public is very diverse, and all these pressures, all these base budget pressures add up. So that's why we have to begin with the $1.2 billion pressure, and we have a plan. In this budget, we have a multi-year plan. Last year was 1.8. This year is $1.2 billion, and then we have strategies, to bring down the budget pressures. From expenditure side, led by staff, it could be the revenue side. We continue to explore. Let's say commercial parking levy. We don't have that yet, but we are looking at that based on council direction, and we continue to look at other revenue opportunities. And last but not least is the intergovernmental contribution. We continue to work closely with the Ontario government. We are talking about in discussions about the New Deal 2.0. So we have New Deal last year. So we will continue that conversation because we know that the New Deal arrangement is only lasts for 3 years, and the next year the New Deal will be completed, will be wrapped up. So staff has a lot of strategies, working with the other levels of government to look at the multi-year strategies to bring down the budget pressure.
There's just one last question, which I'll answer. People were asking where they can see the presentation. This presentation is available on toronto.ca/budget, and you can download the budget notes as well from there. Councillors?
Thank you. Can we give a round of applause to Anthony and Mervyn as well for fielding those questions? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you to staff, of course. They do a lot of the heavy lifting around here. Thank you to everyone who attended this evening, and thank you to those online. Thank you to our interpreters. You guys are awesome. And thank you to my colleague, Deputy Mayor Malik. And thank you for participating. The budget continues. As you know, there are a few more town halls taking place. I think the mayor has one tonight. I think there's one next week. And of course, I'm on the budget committee, and we have public consultations all of next week. It's going to be a long week for me, so wish me luck. But thank you so much.
Thank you. And I will just summarize a little bit of what we heard tonight. And like we've said before, continuing to be in touch with us and with the budget committee members. We heard tonight that there's a big emphasis on ensuring we're able to access affordable housing, supporting those without homes, bylaw enforcement, making the city more affordable, including concerns about property tax percentage and how we are maximizing and being expansive in terms of what revenue tools we have, ensuring safety for all of our members, making sure traffic and transit is moving, effective and affordable TTC service, making sure that we are being serious about what our cost savings are year over year. And I just want to say that Councillor Moise and I, in November, it was 2 years in this role. And so much of what we have been doing is how do we continue to get the city back on track by being as responsible in terms of what we have to deliver as a city and how we do it better with other levels of government, and protecting services such as libraries, community centers, green spaces, and stepping up to our climate leadership. As Councillor Moise said, there's a few more opportunities coming up. We have the budget committee on January 21st. Next week, we have the telephone town hall as well. You can get everything you need at toronto.ca/budget. And on my website, as well as Councillor Moise's website, we have links to all of the resources that we've talked about. I want to thank again Anthony and Mervyn. I want to thank the budget chief and the mayor for joining us as well. And most of all, thank you all for joining us. And again, can we give a big round of applause to our sign language interpreters, to Marcia and Christopher, who were here earlier, for taking us through and making sure that as many people as possible we're able to access the discussion tonight. Thank you so much. And get home safely and stay warm.